What's up everyone, Nito here, and welcome back. Today I am playing a new character, and this is a Ember Fusillade Titan that takes advantage of some reduced skill effect duration scaling on the tree. And Ember Fusillade is this skill right here, so it shoots out some fireballs, and as you can see, with reduced duration, they fire off very quickly. Normally they hover around your character for 1.3 seconds by default, and if you recast within that 1.3 seconds before they start firing, it's going to prevent that duration from expiring, so it's going to basically reset the duration. So as long as you're continually recasting, it's just summoning more fireballs above your head, and then you have to stop casting in order for them to fire off. So as an example, this is kind of what it looks like. And, you know, it takes a little while for them to fire off. So this is using my weapon swap set right now, just as a demonstration, and my weapon swap set does not have the reduced duration on the tree. But what I'm doing is I'm taking both reduced duration clusters, so you can see right here is one, and then the other one is all the way up here. So we're pathing all the way up to the top, and we're taking these skill effects, reduced skill effect duration nodes right there. And then I am a Titan with hulking form, which is going to increase the effect of small passive skills. So these small skill points are giving 50% increased effect, and so in total you can get 80% reduced duration on the tree for all of your skills. And so when I swap back to my main weapon set, that's when it looks like this, right? So the 1.3 second duration is getting reduced all the way down to 2.6 or 0.26 seconds. And I have it so that I'm using some reduced cast speed from considered casting and scattershot, and I have it like timed just right with my cast speed so that all three of the projectiles that get summoned fire off before the next cast comes in, so I never have to stop and wait for the duration to expire, right? Which is really strong unless you just kind of like continually cast it like this. And the other cool thing, so let me just re-enable that. The other cool thing you can do with reduced duration is you can use Time of Need. So this is a buff, a spirit buff that gives you kind of like a heal every 10 seconds, and it removes curses and it removes elemental ailments. So it's a 10-second duration by default, but with 80% reduced skill effect duration on the tree, that goes down to 2 seconds. And then we can use fast forward support to get that down to 1.4 seconds. So if I activate this, you can see that my character has this flashing effect every 1.4 seconds, and that's when it's getting healed for 741 life. So that is a very, very powerful effect. And I even have the Time of Need Prism of Belief, Prism of Belief Jewel here, which gives +3 levels to Time of Need. Which further reduces that base cooldown and the amount of life you get from this. So it's really, really good recovery here from this Time of Need buff. So I'm going to show you kind of what a endgame map looks like. So I'll just jump into a tier 15 with a boss here, and we'll see how it goes. And you may notice that all of my projectiles are forking, and that's because I am using the Snake Pit ring here, which says that projectiles from spells fork, but they can't chain, and they can't pierce. And then I'm anointing Split Shot, which gives 75% chance for an additional projectile when forking. And then I have that same stat on 2 joules. So over here, you get 18% chance for an additional projectile. And then up here, I have another 15% chance. So that is going to give 100% chance to get an additional projectile. So that's why you get essentially 3 projectiles when it forks. So it hits the enemy and it basically kind of like continues forward with another projectile. And then 2 more bounce out to the sides. So that helps with clearing a lot. But it also pairs really well with ricochet support, which is going to make projectiles have a chance to chain off of terrain. And in PoE2, it seems that all projectiles that chain off terrain can hit the same enemy that they chained off of. So they can basically chain back and more or less shotgun on the main enemy. So by multiplying your projectiles through fork, you actually have a DPS increase as long as there is terrain to chain off of, which is really powerful. And then I also use Eye of Winter here as a way of stacking up the critical weakness debuff on enemies. And I also have it linked to knockback support, so it's good for just kind of like creating some space between you and enemies if they get up in your face, which is nice. And this is a crit build, so most of my tree is scaling crit chance, crit damage. So the critical weakness buff is very powerful. And it, as far as I understand, it basically adds base crit chance to the skill, which Ember Fusillade is only, what is it? It's a 7% base chance, and you can get up to 10% just from critical weakness, so it, like, basically gives you, like, 2.5 times your crit chance, your total crit chance, if you have full stacks of critical weakness. So it's really powerful. It's really good on bosses and, like, tanky rares and stuff, so that's what we use that for. I don't know what the deal is with enemies doing this. I've noticed this happening a lot. There's this weird bug where enemies are dead, but they're just, like, hovering there. It's kind of weird. I think maybe it happens when they die off screen. Let me see if I can find the boss real quick. There should be a boss in this map somewhere.
can't yet.
You can see the projectiles bouncing off the train back and hitting the boss again. So that's what I was talking about, how it increases your DPS, having those projectiles like that. And you'll also notice that I was using Ball Lightning to get the shock ground. And I believe I have like a 57% increased damage shock. And yeah, so we use like weapon swap to get some of these shock nodes, magnitude effective shock, like over here and then down here as well. And our weapon swap also changes from the reduced skill effect duration to increased skill effect duration. So that way we can have a much longer ground effect, as well as a longer flame wall and a longer critical weakness debuff on enemies. And same up here as well. So it's really easy to swap between reduced skill effect duration and increased skill effect duration, because the nodes are basically right next to each other. So yeah, just to go over the rest of the tree here. Currently, I have not done my last ascendancy point yet, but right now we're just taking hulking form, obviously just because that's the only way to get the 80% reduced skill effect duration. Without this, you can get like 64%, I believe, from taking both clusters. But reduced skill effect duration, since it's additive, it gets way more powerful the more of it you have. Like the closer to 100% reduced duration you get, like the more noticeable it is. So just having that 50% increased effect of the small nodes is actually quite impactful. Not to mention that this also affects all of the other small nodes on the tree. So like all of these crit nodes become like very strong. You'll also notice I'm doing blood magic, so we can kind of like ignore most of the costs of skills because it's using our life instead of our mana. And that just makes it a lot easier to just spam spells all the time. And then for my last ascendancy point, I just have 15% more max life. I am currently doing this kind of like half life, half energy shield hybrid type thing. I wanted to do a full life build, but it's really just not at all viable in the current game. Life builds are just way weaker than energy shield, so, and plus I'm kind of pathing up into the energy shield area of the tree anyways, so we do pick up like some nodes like this stuff, energy shield, recharge, energy shield here, and then these guys up here as well. And that's pretty much all the energy shield I have on the tree, and I have more shield than life just from that. And then gear-wise, I'm using the Series Sustain helmet. This thing is pretty OP, honestly. It makes some damage bypass your energy shield, but then it gives you up to 30% of your max life as extra maximum energy shield, which is just really strong, especially with how easy it is to scale energy shield on the tree. So that gives you a ton of flat energy shield. And then, you know, the rest of my gear, like there's a little bit of energy shield on a few pieces, but it's not, you know, it's not a very significant amount. But yeah, I'm also using Cloak of Flame just because it is a really good way of reducing physical damage by converting it to fire damage. And you'll see that I have 82% max fire res right now. And most of that is coming from the Rise of the Phoenix Shield. And the reason that I'm using this is partially because of the synergy with Cloak of Flame. Obviously, by reducing the fire damage you take, you're also reducing the physical damage you're taking with Cloak. But then I'm also using a Coward's Legacy belt, Corrupted, and this is going to... Normally it rolls, this mod goes up to 75%, but you can corrupt it up to 92%. So I count as on low life if I'm below 92% of my max life. And you'll notice that Rise of the Phoenix gives you a ton of regen and some extra fire res when you're on low life. And that is kind of how we're sustaining our life cost from blood magic. So it makes it super easy to just like, you know, like you'll see that I have enough regen that my life never really goes down past the low life threshold. But what I actually wanted to do, and what I've been testing, is I wanted to activate Pain Attunement just by having a life cost that was high enough that it would spend 8% of my max life every cast so that I'm always below the low life threshold of 92% whenever the cast finishes, so that you would always get the Pain Attunement crit damage bonus scaling. Unfortunately, Ember Fusillade just has a really low cost in general compared to other skills. Like, you can see even like Flame Wall has a 303 life cost, and that's on a 2-link, right? And but Ember Fusillade has only 101. So it is actually kind of hard to spend that much life with your Ember Fusillade in order to trigger Pain Attunement. So I ended up kind of specking out of it because it just like wasn't really working that well. I could use like some other supports like these three that have a cost multiplier on them, but they're kind of inefficient. Like, they're not as good damage supports. And even with that cost multiplier, it still is really hard to spend enough to get your life below that threshold with as much regen as I have from Rise of the Phoenix. So like, I could drop Rise of the Phoenix, I could drop a bunch of regen and like only rely on Time of Need in order to get my life back every 1.4 seconds or whatever. That's definitely an option. I may end up doing that. Like, this is by no means the final variation of this build. I think there's a lot of things that could be tweaked. I think there's a lot of ways to improve like defenses and stuff overall. But for now, this is kind of what I've settled on. But I do think it would be really cool to get Pain Attunement in here. And this node is actually quite good. With the way that like crit damage bonus works, it's kind of weird scaling in PoE2. So like crits normally have plus 100% crit damage bonus, so that's basically double damage. And then on the tree, you get all these nodes like this that have increased critical damage bonus, so that's increasing that plus 100%. So like 30% increase would bring you to like 130, right? And then this would be a more multiplier on top of that. So 130 times 1.3, basically. So it is very strong damage-wise if you can maintain that low life status, but you also don't want to be on full life when you're casting, which is good because of Blood Magic. You're kind of never on full life when you actually cast. But there is obviously a slight delay on Ember Fusillade, so if you have too much regen, you're going to be back to full life by the time it actually hits the enemy, and you might get the downside of Pain Attunement. So like, it is kind of a fine line that you have to like work out. You like, obviously you want regen because regen is really powerful, but you don't want so much that you're always going to be on full life, right? So I haven't quite figured out the best way to deal with that just yet. It may be as simple as just getting additional levels on Ember Fusillade. Like right now, I think I have a level 19 gem. Obviously, that can go up to level 20. And then I think you can corrupt to level 21. I could swap out the Prism of Disbelief, the Time of Need one, for an Ember Fusillade one. That's another option, which might get me another couple levels and might push the life cost high enough that I can frequently proc the Pain Attunement. Character's level 87, by the way. So I have quite a few more levels I can squeeze out of this. But yeah, so just to go over the rest of the tree, we just kind of like, we got some fire damage, fire pen. We obviously have our skill effect duration stuff here. We have crit chance stuff here. These are like probably some of the strongest crit chance nodes on the entire tree. They also give you plus strength, which is really good. But at the they have the downside of increased mana cost, but obviously that doesn't matter. It will increase mana cost and reduce maximum mana, but that doesn't matter because we're Blood Magic anyways, right? So, yeah, and then you want to be careful about taking cast speed nodes. So these are the only cast speed that I have on the entire tree. And the reason is because if you cast too quickly, you're going to interrupt the firing of your Ember Fusillade, and it's basically going to cause them to never fully go off, right? Like if I were to swap in like Arcane Tempo instead of Ricochet, you can see they start, see how I still have balls like stacking up on top of me. They're not all firing off until I let go, and then once I stop casting, then they all fire off. But yeah, so if you're casting too quickly, then you end up like stacking up additional additional balls, and they don't have enough time to fire off before your next cast. So it's kind of a fine line that you have to like figure out the exact cast time. So like currently, let's see what I'm at right now. My cast time is 0.47 seconds, and that seems to be like right around the sweet spot with a 0.2 seconds, 0.26 second hover duration. You could also use fast forward on Ember Fusillade, and that would bring you down to 0.18 second hover duration. But I don't think it's necessary. Like you, even without this, I'm firing all 3 projectiles from every cast at my current cast speed. So in theory, I mean, it would let you get a little bit of extra cast speed, I guess, but I'm not sure it's worth it over just using like ricochet support. And obviously ricochet is good for the wall chaining stuff that I was explaining before. You can also get that same stat, chance to chain from terrain, on some jewels. So on the same jewel that has like the projectile fork, the additional fork projectile, you can get the up to 7% chance to chain additional time from terrain. So it's not a huge chance, but it is. I mean, I think the reason that stat it only rolls up to 7% is because it is actually like kind of a more multiplier with projectiles, just because I believe in PoE2 all the projectiles can hit the same target, and like they all do actual damage, which is pretty cool. The other thing I was messing around with is these nodes, these additional spell projectile nodes, which give chance to fire 2 additional projectiles. And if you take these nodes here, and there's 3 more up here, with all of that, with hulking form, you can get, I believe it's around 70% chance for 2 additional projectiles, which is really good, but I ended up dropping them because they were basically like I was showing before, they were like overcasting, right? Like I was getting additional projectiles just hovering above me that I couldn't actually fire off unless I stopped casting completely. So there is some benefit to doing that because Ember Fusillade has this deal 7% more damage for each previous Ember fired in sequence. So you can stack up to 12 Embers. So it's quite a bit of more damage, actually, if you stack them all up and then fire them all off at the same time. But it is a lot clunkier of a playstyle, and I find that just doing the continued casting like this with the immediate firing is just, like, much nicer. I don't know for sure, like, damage-wise, if it is actually worth doing that. Maybe I'll spec into it a little bit more, but you basically... if you do that, you're going to want to have fast forward on Ember Fusillade, which is like you're dropping another like potentially big damage support to get that. And you're also losing fast forward on time of need, so you get less healing from it. So it is a trade-off. And then you also take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points on the tree. So those 8 points I'm currently spending, you know, mostly on like stuff like crit chance, spell damage, fire pen, stuff like other damaged nodes. So it is a bit of a trade-off, and I haven't quite decided if it's worth doing or not. I think that my current setup is better, but I still have more testing that I want to do. So yeah, and then the other thing I tested was Zealot's Oath instead of doing Energy Shield Recharge, and this is going to make excess life recovery from regen applied to Energy Shield. But unfortunately, with Blood Magic, because we are constantly spending our life, we only start regenerating Energy Shield if we are at maximum life. So while we're casting, we basically stop regenerating Energy Shield, which is not good. Because when you're in combat is exactly when you want to be regenerating Energy Shield. So I ended up opting for some like faster start of recharge, faster recharge rate stuff instead, and I think that feels a little bit better while mapping. There are cases where your recharge is constantly getting interrupted, and Zealot's Oath would actually be stronger. But also the other thing is like we're never on low life when Zealot's Oath is kicking in, because like so we never get the extra like 3.7% life regen from Rise of the Phoenix, which is unfortunate. Because you have to be on full life in order for Zealot's Oath to start. But you do still get quite a bit of just other base regen. So like I have 3.3% on my shield, Normally these both roll up to 3%, but I have a corrupted shield that's got quite good rolls on it. So it goes up to 3.3 and 3.7. And then I also have a corrupted ring with another 1.7% life regen. And then you get a little bit more on the tree from like these nodes over here. There is also a really good node cluster right here, which gives you increased life regen rate while on low life, and another 1.5% life recovery per second while on low life. I would love to pick this up, but it's just like too much pathing to get there for this current setup. But I think there could definitely be another build where you do grab all of that stuff with Rise of the Phoenix, and you can probably get somewhere like 20% life regen just passively, because all of these small nodes have percent increased life regeneration rate, which is a multiplier to all of the like base regen from the shield and stuff. So yeah, you can easily get like 10+% life regen when on low life, like before any of those multipliers kick in, and that's just really strong. So yeah, I mean there's other life regen nodes like right here. This one is like wall stationary though, which kind of sucks because you're never really stationary for this build. So I didn't pick that up, but yeah. Anyway, so the other things that we're doing, let's see. We are running a Blasphemy Curse with Enfeeble and Magnified Effect and Ritualistic Curse for extra AoE. I am right next to Zone of Control, which I might end up taking just to get better AoE on the Curse and increased effect, and also hindering all the enemies. So this is a really good cluster for any Blasphemy build. So we could take that. We may even end up going for Whispers of Doom to get a second Curse set up. But that's going to require some extra spirit, which I could probably get on my amulet. Currently, my amulet looks like this. It's got +3 to all spell levels, and a bunch of life and strength and stuff. But yeah, if we get one with like spirit on it, you could probably fit in another Blasphemy Aura, which would be really powerful. Probably would be Temp Chains, just because I don't think I want Flammability, because I already have like a bunch of penetration, right? You get 9% from these small nodes, 10% from there, so that's 19, plus another 18% there, plus another 15%. So you get a ton of like penetration right from the tree. So I don't think having flammability is all that useful. And if you need to, you can also use the Fire Pen support. But yeah, I don't think there's many monsters that are going to have more than like, I don't know, 60 fire res or whatever that is. Maybe there are, I don't know. But it doesn't seem like it would be all that worth it. Yeah, and then the rest of the tree is pretty much just like crit chance stuff here, crit chance stuff here. Got some projectile speed stuff right there. And then this node is good because it has a reduced cast speed on it, which is what you want in order to fire off all your projectiles before the next cast happens. And yeah, like this node plus these two nodes like kind of balance out a little bit. Otherwise you're gonna just like overcast. That's bad. There's also like you have access to like these aura effect nodes, which does work for blasphemy. So you can multiply the curse effect by the aura effect basically. And that's pretty strong if I do end up going for this like full blasphemy setup. But yeah, we'll see where that ends up. But yeah, and then in the weapon swap, again, we just have shock magnitude stuff here and there, and then the increased skill effect duration over here and over here, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, so that is kind of the current setup, and then just to go over all of the jewels, we got Time of Need, we got Fast Forward in there, so it's much quicker. Blasphemy with Enfeeble, Magnified Effect, Ritualistic Curse for better AoE. On the weapon swap, I have Blink with Ingenuity for increased cooldown recovery rate, so that just lets me, like, you know, blink right after using, like, Flame Wall or whatever. Ember Fusillade, our main setup, is going to be Considered Casting, because, again, we want that reduced cast speed. Conk Effect, because it is an AoE skill, but we don't really care about the AoE that much, because we have so many projectiles firing off that you don't really need the actual AoE for clearing. So we just want that 40% more damage. And then Ellie Focus, because we don't really care about the Ignite. Scattershot, because we want the 2 additional projectiles, and then we also kind of want the less cast speed as well. And Ricochet, because we want to chain off of terrain. Then I have Eye of Winter here with Unleash and Bludgeon. So Bludgeon is going to knock enemies back, which is actually really nice with Eye of Winter just because it hits so many times. So all of those little projectiles are going to apply critical weakness and knock enemies back. Then we have Solar Orb. This one I don't actually use that much anymore, but you can put fire exposure on it with Strip Away support, which increases the effective exposure. It's really good for Solar Orb because Solar Orb is guaranteed to ignite if the enemy is like close to it. So you just drop the orb on top of the enemy, and that ignite is going to proc fire exposure. So yeah, like fire exposure support only works on skills that hit, so you can't put it on like Flame Wall or whatever, because Flame Wall does not actually hit. But Solar Orb does hit, but it's also guaranteed to ignite, which is why it's so good with fire exposure support. And then we use Flame Wall with Fortress so that it's in a circle, and then Fire Mastery just to give +1. And you'll notice that it gives quite a lot of flat damage to projectiles that pass through it. So 142 to 202 added fire damage. And if you compare that, actually it's 158 to 226 on my weapon swap. If you compare that to Ember Fusillade, which deals 414 to 261. So it's giving you like probably what, 30% more damage, something like that. It's quite significant. So yeah, Flame Wall is really good. And then I have the Lightning Warp set up, which is going to always leave shocked ground, and you have to have Ball Lightning in order to warp to the ball and then leave the shocked ground underneath. So we use that for bosses or like particularly tanky rares. Yeah, and that's like, I think, a 57% more damage shock, which is quite significant as well. So yeah, that's pretty much the build setup right there. Just go over some gear. Oh, that's my weapon swap setup. So main hand wand is just a +5 fire spells wand with some increased crit chance, some increased spell and fire damage, and then some extra damage as lightning, which ideally would be fire for this. Having extra lightning does let you shock occasionally, but because I'm using I ended up using LE Focus anyways, so I don't really need the shock from that, and I get the shock from Lightning Warp anyways, so like, yeah, that damage as extra lightning would be better if it was like damage as extra fire, but still pretty good, still extra damage. We don't care about like the mana or anything that's on there. I have, again, the Aziri's Disdain helmet for the max life as extra maximum energy shield. We have Rise to the Phoenix with all the extra max fire res and all that stuff, regen. The amulet for +3 spell skills and a bunch of life. This ring is just like filling out res and life and extra strength and stuff like that. Snake Pit, obviously super important for forking. This is required. You kind of want one with relatively low values on the cast speed. Otherwise, you're just going to overcast. So, yeah. I mean, you could, if you can only get a higher cast speed one, you can drop these 2 nodes and like pick up these instead. So like it maybe is slightly easier to hit that, like the correct cast speed if you mess around with that. But currently mine has, yeah, low rolled cast speed, which I think is good. Gloves are just life res. The belt for low life stuff. And then boots are just life res move speed. And then, yeah, obviously rarity charm. Like, you will get frozen and stunned occasionally. The nice thing is about getting frozen is you're only ever frozen for at most 1.4 seconds, because then Time of Need goes off and it cleanses the freeze from you, which is really powerful. But yeah, stuff like stun charm is also good to have. But obviously you can't get extra charm slots on the belt because the belt is unique. I kind of hope GGG changes that system, because I think tying the charms to the belt slot is very limiting in terms of like unique belts. But we'll see. And then, yeah, Mana Flask doesn't matter because we don't have any mana. And then, like, I just have like a partial instant flask for my life flask, which I rarely use because we have so much recovery just from time of need and all that stuff anyways. Yeah, so that's the build. Thank you for watching. I have been enjoying messing around with all this reduced duration stuff. If you know of any other cool reduced duration interactions that you want to talk about, let me know. You can join my Discord. I'll leave a link down in the comment section. It's a good place to just talk about cool interactions and stuff. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.